Just to bring excitement to the university, and I just love everything about it. I love Houston. I love University of Houston. I love my coaches, love my teammates, and we here.
Yes, the University of Houston is here. Welcome, everybody, to the latest sports stream here from Fox 26. I'm Sal Manine, sports reporter at Fox 26. As you just heard, Deshaun Watson, senior guard, senior leader, the heart and soul of the University of Houston men's basketball team, who is Final Four bound. It's been a long time since anybody in Cougs Nation could say that. Not since Phi Slamma Jamma, 1984. Has U of H gone all the way to the Final Four, and that's where they are already because they're in a bubble out in Indianapolis, but getting set for Baylor. It'll be a Saturday afternoon showdown, 4:14 Houston time to watch that game. Winner will get either number one Gonzaga or UCLA, who have made a Cinderella run to the Final Four of their own. We'll, of course, get to U of H. We'll get to the latest on Deshaun Watson as this story yet again continues to evolve day by day. And look at the calendar. We're one day away from opening day in Major League Baseball. That's right. The regular season begins tomorrow. The Astros start on the road. They're out west. It'll be a 9 o'clock first pitch for the Astros out in Oakland. So we'll try to touch on a little bit of all of that. But, of course, we have to start with the University of Houston. A great weekend for them in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, taking down Syracuse, taking down Oregon State, and punching their ticket to go to the Final Four again. First time since the Reagan administration that U of H could say that. And they did it in both those games, as they've done all year long, by relying on their bread and butter. Play tough defense, crash the offensive glass. It was close with Syracuse early on, and then the U of HD just took over, absolutely dominated the Orange, held Syracuse, a historically good program, in March. Jim Boeheim's been doing this for 45 years, held the Orange to its lowest point total in an NCAA tournament game in its history. And then they come back 2 nights later against Oregon State, who, despite their record, despite the little number that said their seed next to the Beavers, was playing as well as anybody right now in the NCAA tournament, and U of H was able to take care of them. Looked like they were on their way towards a blowout at halftime. Then the Beavs made their run, but then again, it was the offensive rebounding that was the difference for U of H. 19 offensive boards as the Cougs were able to secure their spot in the Final Four. You heard from Deshaun Watson just a moment ago. We have plenty to get to regarding everybody in Cougs Nation and how excited they are with this. Let's hear from the man who's kind of responsible for this resurgence, Kelvin Sampson, after his team earned its trip to the Final Four.
Teams that were ranked all year that got most of the credit for being great teams were great teams. Illinois and Ohio State, all those teams. But, we just kept working and kept getting better. And, when the brackets came out, I told our kids we got a chance to do something special here. Let's go 1-0. 1-0 against Cleveland State, 1-0 against Rutgers, 1-0 against Syracuse, and now 1-0 against Oregon State. And next Saturday, we'll try to go 1-0 again. That's how we approach things.
That is how the Cougs have approached it all year long. And Kelvin Sampson is not shy about saying he realizes it may not always be pretty, and he recognizes that his team doesn't get quite the buzz, especially nationally, as all eyes have been on Indy right now. His team doesn't get the same kind of pub as the Gonzagas and Baylors and certainly all the Giants who we saw go down, especially you just look at the Midwest region, U of H's region. A lot of people thought Illinois had that one sewed up, but they ran into Loyola Chicago, who was ranked in the top 25 heading into the tournament. A lot of people at the start of last weekend going into the Sweet 16 thought, well, this is the Ramblers' weekend to lose, or their weekend to lose out on a chance to go to the Final Four, I should say. But again, it was Oregon State taking care of them, and U of H has just found a way. So look, the wise guys in Vegas don't think that the Cougs are the favorites. I believe at last checked I saw it was Baylor -6. Certainly not the same cases on the other side where Gonzaga is a 14-point favorite over the 11 seed UCLA. But if U of H can just keep its approach as it's done all tournament long, all season long, really the last 4 or 5 years, really the entirety of Kelvin Sampson's tenure at Houston and what's been his bread and butter for his entire career as a coach, just stick to those little things they do right. They have a shot against Baylor. Now, again, if this was a 7-game series, gun to your head, perhaps you say, look, it's going to be tough to have to beat the Bears 4 times in 7 games. But U of H on one night, they play defense. They knock down some threes. They hit the offensive glass. There's no reason to think they can't get by the Bears, spoil that Gonzaga-Baylor matchup that I think the entire country has been looked at it as though it was kind of fait accompli since really the first week of college basketball. So you heard from Coach. We heard a little bit from Deshaun Giroux. Let's get another one in from the Cougs senior leader who's been Mr. Do-It-All this tournament for U of H.
Like a dream come true. You know, growing up, watching the Final Four, watching college basketball, you know, you always think about getting to this point, you know, seeing former players on TV do this. You know, like I say, as a kid, I'm watching TV growing up. I'm like, I hope I'll be here one day, and man, I'm really here. Never thought I'd see this day, but, you know, God has other plans for people. And, you know, God has a plan for me and my teammates. We're here for a reason.
Again, Deshaun Giroux, the senior leader and the guy who has been stuffing the stat sheet, and that's what they're going to need for him again. Not only was he the conference defensive player of the year, and we saw what he did against Buddy Boeheim, who looked like he was having a Steph Curry-like performance, propelling Syracuse to the Sweet 16. Deshaun Giroux locked him up, then did the same thing, made things difficult for the Beavs, and Ethan Thompson, their star, was never able to really get going. And they're going to need that kind of defense, especially on the perimeter from Giroux and really from the entirety of the Cougs. If you look at Baylor, they're a lot like U of H in terms of how they approach things on the offensive end. They rely on their guards, rely on the perimeter, and that's where the threat initially comes from. They have multiple guys who can beat you, and then they have a guy in the middle who does all the dirty work, just like U of H has Justin Gorham. But Jared Butler, Masio Teague, Davion Mitchell, these are the guys who, just like U of H relies on Quentin Grimes, Marcus Sasser, Deshaun Giroux to be their catalyst on the offense, that's what Baylor relies on. And this is going to be a classic defense versus offense matchup. Now, Baylor's no slouch on D. Just because they don't rank as high in the echelons of the national statistics as U of H doesn't mean that they're a completely abhorrent defensive team, but they rely on their offense, on the fact that they have so many guys who can hurt you and that they can put multiple shooters on the floor at one time. I was looking it up earlier. They have 5 different players who have attempted at least 73 pointers this season and are knocking down 40% or better of those threes. That's the reason that Baylor leads the entirety of Division I's men's basketball in three-point field goal percentage. They're ranked 14th in the country in three-point makes per game. They make 10 threes per game on average. So if U of H does not get out to shooters, if they do not make things difficult, if they allow them to stretch them out, rotate the ball around, hit those skip passes like we saw Rutgers doing at times when they gave U of H all it could handle in the second round, that's when things become difficult for the Cougars. But again, it starts with Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, Masio Teague, Adam Flagler, Matthew Mayer, all making 40% or better from long range. Conversely, though, this is where if there is an Achilles heel to this Baylor team, it's rebounding. Defensive rebounding. There are 340 teams in Division I men's basketball. The Bears rank 299th in defensive boards. So we know how good Houston is. Third in the country in offensive rebounds per game. they're going to have to not only get those offensive boards, but then they're going to have to turn them into makes on the other end. One of the big keys for Houston in the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight was that Marcus Sasser broke out of his slump, saw the ball go through the net early, and that really got him going, and he played some of his best games that he's played all season long. They're going to need that against Baylor, and certainly if they get beyond Baylor and end up facing Gonzaga, who I don't think should have much trouble with UCLA, they're going to need Marcus Sasser. They're going to need Quentin Grimes to play like an All-American, to play like a guy who many expect to be an NBA draft pick this year, probably at the end of the first round. They're going to need those two guys to step up and to step up big. So look, it may not be pretty. It may not be what all the fans want, but there's no reason to think that the University of Houston cannot get it done against Baylor. And look, I know I don't know as much about the game of basketball as the guys out there in Indy and probably the guys out there in the desert who make a lot more money than all of us trying to fill out our brackets. But someone who does know the game, maybe a little bit biased, but you can be the judge of that. He thinks that the Cougs have a great chance, and that's the man who helped lead the University of Houston to their last Final Four before this one. He took them there 3 straight years, in fact. You know, of course, I'm talking about the dream, Hakeem Olajuwon. Our sports director, Mark Berman, caught up with Hakeem yesterday to get his thoughts on this run that the Cougs are on and just what kind of chances he gives them this weekend in Indy. Let's take a listen to what Dream had to say about his alma mater.
Wonderful to see the program back, and it's very, very difficult, you know, to recruit players on a losing program. But I think since Coach Simpson have been there, has reestablished that confidence in players that they love to come, they love to play, and by winning, they got a chance to play in the big stage. And the way they are playing, they can win it all, and I believe that for sure.
What would it mean to you if they're able to do something that you and your other members of Phi Slamma Jamma couldn't do, and that's win a championship?
Well, they said the history. I mean, I think it's overdue, and if any group can do it, this group they can do it, and they play like it. They know what's at stake, and they're giving all their best, and it's amazing to watch. And I'm very excited. I'm proud, of the university, of the players, of the coach. I mean, the city is all behind them.
Hakeem, what has it meant to you when you look back now that you helped set the bar there? You helped create Phi Slamma Jamma and the mystique and the aura. What has that meant to you all these years?
I mean, it's just it wasn't our intention or our goal to do that. We were just playing to win. When the coach assembled a bunch of great players together, which when you look back now, 2 of us out of the team, Clyde and I, are the Hall of Famers. So it meant something back then, and we didn't know the future, what we have become. But at the same time, when you look at this group of guys that are playing right now, tremendous potential that there will be, pros among them. But it's well deserved.
What do you think about what Coach Kelvin Sampson has done? He got there, it was a bad situation, and here 7 years later, they're in the Final Four.
I mean, he was with the Rocket for a couple of years, assistant, and see how he handled practice. Very disciplined. He loves to win, and the way he communicates with the players is unbelievable. So when he got that job for the University of Houston, I knew right away that he was the right coach. But I didn't know he can take it to this level this quick. So you have to give him a lot of credit.
Our thanks again to Hakeem Olajuwon for his time yesterday, and he's been rooting as hard as anybody in the city of Houston. I got to say, Phi Slamma Jamma was before my time. I remember hearing stories growing up from parents and family members about what it was like back then. That, those guys you watch on the Rockets used to play at U of H, and they were awesome. I cannot remember seeing the city of Houston like this, as far as red everywhere you go, people talking about it. I've heard some schools are starting to tell their students and teachers, wear red if you're coming to school or even on Zoom, support the Cougs this weekend. So it's been great for the city, especially when you take into account everything else that's been going on, not just this year, but even within the sports scene specifically. It's been some rough time for Houston fans. So the University of Houston doing all it can to make this a memorable time for the city of Houston. And it's not over yet. Again, Saturday, 4:14 Central Time is when they take on Baylor in Indianapolis. Fox 26 will be there, so be sure to follow Mark Berman on Twitter and, of course, all the latest on Fox26Houston.com and on Fox 26 on your television set, as we'll be along for the ride with the Cougars. So that's just one of the basketball things going on in the city right now. I do want to make a quick mention. The Rockets up 15 right now, late in the second quarter against the Brooklyn Nets. They're in Brooklyn. James Harden has already gone off for 17 points, 5 boards, and 5 assists for the Nets. No shock there. But again, the Rockets are in this weird spot where you want them to do well as far as developing the young guys. You want Kevin Porter Jr., KJ Martin, Jayshawn Tate, Christian Wood, all these guys who are 25 or younger who have shown some really nice things at times. And in the case of some of those guys, they've only been on the team for a minute. You want those guys to develop, but you have to be careful with how this final month of the season plays out, because the Rockets win too many games and they don't end up with one of the first 4 picks in the draft. They have to give that draft pick to Oklahoma City, and it just makes rebuilding and trying to come back from the post-James Harden era that much more difficult. But as of right now, Rockets up 13, 4 minutes left in the first half. Tomorrow, though, that's the other big day for Houston sports fans, with the Astros finally getting things going for the regular season. Again, they're out west to start things out as they visit Oakland for a 4-game set this weekend. It's going to be Zach Greinke, of course, getting the opening day nod for the Stros. Let's take a look quickly at just 3 of the key things that the Astros are going to have to think about as they go into this season and what could possibly make the difference. Obviously, this is a year of change. Gone is George Springer. Again, no Justin Verlander, likely for the entirety of the year as he recovers from Tommy John surgery and then can become a free agent. We've seen how much this roster has changed just from the last time this team was in the World Series in October of 2019, but even just the last year, all the changeover. I think it all starts with pitching. You know what you got with Zach Greinke, but what about those guys behind him? Yes, Christian Javier looked great last year as a rookie, was a Rookie of the Year nominee, but that was playing only 60 games, so only getting so many starts. Now is when you're going to have to play a full season, stretch things out a little bit longer. How do opponents adjust now that they've seen some of these young pitchers who looked good, especially down the stretch and in the playoffs for the Stros? So how do the Astros pitchers then adjust on their end? I think, obviously, I'm not the first one to say this, but as a lot of people have pointed out, because last year was an abbreviated season and you did not have pitchers ratcheting up their innings count like you might normally do, are managers going to really start to let guys go out there and eat up innings? Let them get to 200-plus innings, or there's a lot of folks in baseball who think you're not going to see anybody reaching those upper innings counts like you might normally do. So it may not just be the 5 guys who start for the Astros in the rotation. It's going to be multiple starters. Of course, we know that Framber Valdez is going to be a key part of this pitching staff when he comes back. Right now, he's dealing with that hand injury after he took a comebacker in an exhibition game against the Mets. So he's out for the time being, but at some point, he's going to be slotted in there. Jake Odorizzi, who was a late signing for the Stros. Because of that, he's not going to get the ball in this first series against the A's. He's actually heading to the alternate site for Houston, where he'll get a little bit more work in, but he says he's targeting the first homestand the following week to make his regular season debut. What does he look like playing for a new team? Obviously, we know his track record and a former All-Star. If he can plug right in along with Lance McCullers Jr., who should be totally healthy, he says it's the best he's felt coming out of a spring in quite some time, if not his entire career as an Astro. If you can rely on those three guys to be your workhorses, then you can start to play a little bit of jigsaw on the back end with Urquidy, Luis Garcia, who going into opening day is going to be the fifth starter for the Stros. And again, we don't know how long it's going to be until Framber Valdez is back in the mix. Right now, they're saying it is going to be some time, but the good news for Astros fans is the team does not believe that he needs surgery at this point. So a huge sigh of relief there. While pitching is the most important, obviously we know that this is a very different lineup when you take George Springer, who, for everything we said about Dejan Giroux a couple minutes ago being the heart and soul of U of H, you know what kind of leader and heart and soul of the clubhouse George Springer was. He's obviously in Toronto now. Actually, the Blue Jays announced today he's going to have to start the year on the injured list. But you don't have him leading off. Jose Altuve as your leadoff batter is not a bad replacement. But can Yordan Alvarez step in and provide production over an entire season? We saw what he looked like playing really just half a year in 2019 when he won Rookie of the Year. Now extrapolate that out over an entire season. It looks like the plan right now is that Yordan is going to stick to designated hitter. That's why he's in the lineup. That's why the Stros want him playing every day for his bat. That should help with the knees and with his injury history, which we, of course, saw rear its ugly head last year when Yordan was held to just one game for the Stros. So can he stay healthy? He's coming off that offseason knee surgery, says he feels as great as he has ever felt, and he doesn't think that people really quite understood just what kind of discomfort he was playing with, even when he was healthy a couple years ago. He's had knee problems for a while. So can Yordan stay healthy for an entire season, and can he have the kind of production that the Stros want him to have? You do that, and now all of a sudden it helps mitigate that loss of George Springer, because you still got Jose Altuve, you still got Michael Brantley, you still got Alex Bregman, who's been an all-star, or not just an all-star, but an MVP candidate each of the past few seasons. Kyle Tucker, does he continue his progression as he looked at times last year to be the Astros' most consistent hitter during the regular season? And then, oh, by the way, Carlos Correa, who we saw just what he did in the postseason, and now the Stros trying to lock him up long-term, just as they did Lance McCullers. And then finally, what's that bullpen going to look like, especially at the back end? No Roberto Osuna, who we saw the Stros lose early in last season's abridged season to an injury, but what's the closer outlook look like? We've seen Ryan Presley look really good at times, has looked sharp this spring, but there's a difference between being the everyday closer and being the setup guy. We saw new GM James Glick bring in some new guys. Is it a closer by committee at times? Is it ride the hot hand? Over 162 games, especially like we mentioned earlier, if managers are going to be reluctant to let guys eat up innings because they didn't stretch their arms out like they normally did last year, how are they going to piece together 27 outs? So I still think that the Stros are the favorites in the AL West division going into things, but we saw what Oakland's has looked like each of the past couple seasons. We know that the Angels have the best player in baseball in Mike Trout. They've made some moves to improve their pitching staff. So it's certainly not going to be an easy ride for Houston. But as much as it hurts to lose George Springer and to not have JV for this season, I think if you're an Astros fan, you still have to feel good about the Stros' chances. And there's no reason to think, as long as they still have so many of their core guys on the team, like Altuve, Bregman, Correa, Michael Brantley, that they can't make another run, because they've gone to the ALCS 4 years running and were just one game away from another trip to the World Series a year ago. So again, all gets underway tomorrow, 9 o'clock Central Time out in Oakland. All right. We mentioned Deshaun Watson. We want to get you caught up on the latest on what's going on with the Texans quarterback. The lawsuit count is now up to 21 civil suits filed against Deshaun after a couple more were filed late last night. Today, Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, released a lengthy statement that features 18 different women offering statements of support for Deshaun Watson. These are all women who worked with him as masseuses, saying that he was never anything but professional, that all the different allegations of sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, sexual assault has nowhere close to the interactions they had and their dealings with Deshaun Watson. If you want to read any of the lawsuits, if you want to read any of the statements from these 18 different women, you can go to our website, fox26houston.com. We have them all up there for you. This is come down to, unfortunately, a case of he said, she said, and nobody really knows what did or did not happen behind closed doors, except for Deshaun Watson and the women who have filed suit against him, alleging sexual misconduct. We also saw this week that Sports Illustrated has a report of a woman who has not filed suit against Deshaun and therefore presumably is not seeking some kind of financial restitution, offering her take and saying that, unfortunately, she is alleging sexual misconduct and abuse at the hands of the Texans quarterback. So nobody knows what happens. Deshaun is allowed to give his best defense and defend his name, just as all of us need to give it time to let the legal process play out and let these women who say that they have endured something so terrible and so horrific to let their voices be heard and to make their case. We don't know any other details right now other than these 21 suits that have been filed and Watson's team offering their defense. As far as the football side of things, we did hear from Texans general manager Nick Caserio in the past 2 days, and that addressed Deshaun Watson, and that's something that we have not heard up until now recently from the Texans. They, of course, released a statement saying that they are cooperating with the NFL as the NFL is investigating what is going to happen with Deshaun Watson, or what allegedly happened with Deshaun Watson as part of its personal conduct policy. But Nick Caserio was on the Texans All Access podcast. That's the team podcast just yesterday. And he was asked about Deshaun Watson and the lawsuit, the civil lawsuit count against the Texan signal caller jumping up. And here's what Nick Caserio had to say about that.
We're certainly cognizant and aware. We made a statement at the beginning about where the organization stood. I would say it's a legal situation. It's a legal process. So we're certainly respectful of that. We certainly take them very seriously. The allegations or what's been discussed are certainly troubling. And organizationally, that's not something that we can condone, that we condone those types of actions. But again, we'll let the legal process take care of itself. And however it's going to unfold, we'll certainly comply and do what we can to help and facilitate a resolution for everybody.
So again, that was Nick Caserio on the Texans All Access podcast, acknowledging that basically they're aware of what's going on and they're continuing to cooperate with the league. But it's the first time that we've heard the Texans directly address the allegations and saying that, yes, this is very serious and not something consistent with obviously what they or anybody would want. As far as what this means for the football side of things, remember the last time we had heard from Nick Caserio was before any lawsuits had been filed, before there were any stories out there about Deshaun Watson off the field. He wouldn't even refer to him by name, and he simply said that we are not going to trade the player. He did say Deshaun Watson is our quarterback, but that was back at his introductory news conference long before things changed so much with Deshaun's status off the field. Nick Caserio also did a podcast with Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, where you could see he's opening the door, at least for the first time, that maybe his hardline stance of we're not trading the player, we're not taking phone calls, Deshaun Watson is our quarterback, maybe that might be changing. Here was Nick Caserio from the Albert Breer podcast.
You have said that Deshaun is your quarterback and you plan for Deshaun to be your quarterback. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, I think we'll take it one day at a time. And, I think everything is pretty fluid here. And we'll adjust as we go. And ultimately, I think we'll do what we feel is best for the Houston Texans organizationally.
Okay. So you'd be open to a trade?
I think ultimately we'll do what we feel is best for the organization.
Again, Nick Caserio on with Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated and the Monday Morning Quarterback. That's a different tone that we've heard, at least publicly, from the Texans, and the man who, if Deshaun does get traded at some point, which you read the tea leaves, you listen to folks like John McClain from the Chronicle, who I know he was on with Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk last week, saying he doesn't think Deshaun Watson ever plays a snap for the Texans again. It looks like that the Texans are at least acknowledging that there may be a change at quarterback, which I think a lot of fans were already expecting, given just what we know as far as the football side of things. The legal side still has to play itself out, and nobody knows what's going on there as far as when there will be a resolution. But again, the latest is 21 civil lawsuits against Deshaun Watson. His attorney has released their own statements of various healthcare professionals, masseuses, who are defending Watson and saying that they did not have any type of inappropriate or unprofessional interactions any of the time they worked with him. You can read all of those in their full detail at our website, fox26houston.com. So a lot going on in the Houston sports world right now. And this is going to be a great weekend if you are a Houston sports fan. You got opening day tomorrow. Then the teams will start practicing before the public out in Indianapolis on Friday for the Final Four. U of H will be the early game Saturday afternoon, again, 4:14 Central Time against Baylor. And then the winner will take on Gonzaga, UCLA in the national title game on Monday. Fox 26 will be there for it all. So again, follow our sports director, Mark Berman. He is at Mark Berman, Fox 26 on Twitter. Follow us at our website, fox26houston.com. Keep it tuned to Fox 26 on your TV set, and we'll have you covered throughout this entire weekend. Thanks to everyone who joined us on Facebook, on YouTube, on our website. We'll do it again next week. For everyone here at Fox 26, I'm Sal Manine. Y'all take care.